Ugliest cars of the 1970s. You won't believe number 1. Did you know that one of the ugliest cars of the 1970s was designed with a trunk big enough to hold a 44-gallon drum? Today, we're exploring the top contenders for the title of the ugliest cars of the 1970s. From the AMC Pacer to the infamous Leland P76, we're ranking these design disasters that have to be seen to be believed. Stick around to find out why car number 1 on our list earned a special place in automotive infamy, and discover the surprisingly significant impact these eyesores have had on car culture and design trends. Number 7. 1973 Leland P76. The 1973 Leland P76 is infamous for its place among the ugliest cars of the 1970s, often remembered for its unconventional design and questionable aesthetics. Produced by Leland, Australia, it was introduced during a time when car manufacturers were experiencing with bold styles. But the P76 might have taken it a bit too far. Priced to compete with other family cars of the era, the Leland P76 was relatively affordable, which made it accessible to a broader audience. The P76 was a large car, tipping the scales at around 1,360 kilograms. Its most distinct and controversial feature was its design. The car boasted a wedge shape with a very large trunk that could famously fit a 44-gallon drum. This peculiar capability was more of a gimmick than a practical feature, contributing to the car's reputation for oddity rather than utility. The car's aesthetics were marked by an awkward stance, with proportions that seemed mismatched, a long front overhang and a truncated rear. These design choices, intended to be innovative, were instead perceived as unattractive, making the Leland P76 a standout in the list of the 1970s ugliest cars. Its appearance, combined with low quality control issues, sealed its fate in automotive history as a memorable misstep. And there you have it, the roll call of the 1970s most unforgettable automotive eyesores. Each of these models shows that even the best intentions in car design can go awry, leaving us with vehicles that are hard to look at but impossible to ignore. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated with more content like this. Do you think we missed a particularly egregious example? Drop a comment down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the ugliest cars of the 1970s or any other decade. Number 6. 1975 British Leland Princess. One of the ugliest automobiles of the 70s was indeed the 1975 British Leland Princess, but in a way most people wouldn't boast about. The Princess was awkwardly wedge-shaped, which wasn't expected then and didn't catch on at all. It looked more like a hatchback, but wasn't one. This put potential buyers a bit off. Its very shape contributed in no small measure to its label as an ugly car, because it clashed with the more conventional designs of the era. Below the hood, the Princess was not all that impressive either. It had several engine options, from a modest 1.8-liter to a 2.2-liter engine. However, all these engines managed only 82 to 110 horsepower, which was relatively unimpressive for a car of its size. On the subject of size, it weighed some 1,100 kilograms, thus being hefty even for the low power it came up with to give mediocre performances. If its external design didn't particularly serve its favor, perhaps what made it grotesque was also the impracticality of its boot, which was accessed through a small lid, rendering it as burdensome as it was unattractive. What to say about the 1975 British Leland Princess? The Americans attempted this with the Mustang, but had to wait over 20 years for their next American car. These features combined to make the 1975 British Leland Princess a vehicle that people noticed, but it would be for all of the wrong reasons. Number 5. 1977 Datsun 200 SX. The 1977 Datsun 200 SX, sold as the Nissan Silvia in all export markets, is a car remembered not so much for its performance, but for its look, with this car being considered one of the ugliest produced in the 1970s. The engine in this model was a 2-liter 4-cylinder, making about 90 to 100 horsepower, enough to make it peppy but slow. It weighed approximately 2,300 pounds, which gave its power-to-weight ratio much to be desired. The Datsun 200SX was to provide value, decent economy, and reliability. However, that's where this car would take the lead in stealing looks, albeit for all the wrong reasons. A front grille that looked remarkably like an electric shaver didn't do much for most people's vision of a sporty or sophisticated image for a car. Also, the C-pillar was abnormally prominent, which led it to interfere with a good deal of rearward visibility and ruin proportions further. The overall build of the 200SX was marked by an attempt to be futuristic, but ended up being disjointed and unattractive. The car's design never quite gelled. It had a pasted-together feel rather than an integrated one. The slapdash look did much to help the car gain its notoriety as one of the ugliest of the decade, which stuck with it over its mechanical and practical virtues. And when you consider that, it was a shame about the styling against the fact that it raked up quite acceptable performance and handling figures at a decent price. Number 4. 1977 Lata Cabalero. The 1977 Lata Cabalero is a peculiar standout among the cars of the 1970s, often remembered not for its performance or innovation, but for its questionable aesthetics. Built in Post Falls, Idaho by Donald E. Steinbach, this car was essentially a heavily modified Chevrolet Chevette, which itself was a basic and inexpensive compact car. Steinbach's vision for the Lata Cabalero involved adding around 350 pounds of Bondo and fiberglass to mimic design elements from more prestigious cars like the first-generation Monte Carlo. This customization aimed to create a luxury appearance, but resulted in a rather awkward and disproportionate look. The Lata featured a bizarre mix of style cues that didn't blend well together, contributing heavily to its reputation as an ugly car. Priced nearly double that of Chevette, the Lata Cabalero failed to deliver value or visual appeal. It sold in very small numbers, around 97 units, reflecting its lack of popularity. Its design, perceived as an amalgamation of ill-fitting parts and an awkward stance, solidified its place as one of the ugliest cars of the 1970s. Number 3. 1977 Volvo 262C. The 1977 Volvo 262C stands out as one of the ugliest cars of the 1970s, and for several good reasons. This car was a special edition coupe, part of Volvo's 200 series. It had a unique design that many found less than appealing, largely due to its chopped roof, which was lowered by about 2.6 inches. This alteration gave it a squashed appearance, making the car look awkwardly disproportionate. Under the hood, the Volvo 262C was equipped with a V6 engine, which is shared with the rest of the 260 series. The engine could produce about 127 horsepower, which was decent for the time, but not particularly impressive. The car weighed around 1,420 kilograms, which made it quite heavy, affecting both its performance and fuel efficiency. The external styling, with its low roofline and somewhat boxy shape, didn't resonate well with consumers, making it a tough sell. The aesthetics of the Volvo 262C were primarily what landed it on the list of the ugliest cars. Its design was a result of the collaboration with Italian design firm Bertone, but the reduced headroom and awkward proportions didn't mesh well with Volvo's traditional emphasis on practicality and function. This made the 262C not just an oddity in Volvo's lineup, but also a standout in the annals of poorly received car designs from the 1970s. Number 2. 1978 Oldsmobile Cutless Arrowback. The 1978 Oldsmobile Cutless Arrowback is notorious for its distinctive but unappealing design. Introduced during a period when car manufacturers were trying to innovate with European styles, the Arrowback's design attempted to blend a sedan body with the sleekness of a hatchback. But the result was far from successful. The car weighed around 3,300 pounds, which, combined with its limited horsepower, resulted in sluggish acceleration and a less than thrilling driving experience. Priced similarly to other Cutless models of the time, the Arrowback wasn't particularly expensive, but its value proposition was diminished by its aesthetics and performance. The car featured a sloping rear that ended abruptly, paired with a nearly vertical rear window that contradicted the otherwise smooth lines typical of the Cutless range. What truly made the Arrowback one of the ugliest cars of the 1970s was its awkward proportions and mismatched styling elements. It attempted to be futuristic, but ended up looking disproportionate. The rear design, intended to be innovative, was often criticized for resembling more of a chopped-off hatch rather than a sleek sedan, making it visually jarring and ultimately unpopular with consumers. Number 1. 1975 AMC Pacer. The 1975 AMC Pacer goes down in history as one of the ugliest cars of the 1970s. But it's not just its looks, but also the specs that appear to support the claim. Initially, this car had gained the needed attention not because of its appearance, but because of the way it got styled. The cost of the very affordable Pacer was indeed reasonable for catching the eye of the typical American family, with its price showing AMC was trying to do something different in the compact world. Under the hood, the AMC Pacer had no great shakes, to be honest. It could come with two different power plants: a 3.8-liter inline-6 that made only a terrible 90 horsepower, and a 4.2-liter inline-6 that bumped it up to about 120 horsepower. Those are both relatively poor choices concerning a low powerhouse situation, and don't add anything to the generalization of its poor performance. But it was the body design of the Pacer that defined its notoriety. It aimed to give a panoramic view, and the body was broad and curved with a huge glass area, rendering it bulbous and out of proportion. The width was entirely excessive for a car of this class, and went to the extent that it was dubbed the first wide small car. This design was meant to improve passenger comfort and driving ease, but on the downside, gave the Pacer a fishbowl look, making it conspicuous for all the wrong reasons. In short, as practical as the AMC Pacer was intended to be, good visibility, comfortable, reasonably affordable, the awkward, overweight execution and lackluster performance consigned it to one of the ugliest cars of the 1970s.